Splatoon 3 released a few weeks ago, and within its single player exists a lot of thematic UI that's relevant to the glitchy style Return of the Mammalians is going for. This style is iterated on top of Splatoon 2's Octo expansion, which at the time of its release deviated heavily from what had already been established as Splatoon's core visual identity, which created a second part to this core visual identity, which now includes vaporwave and glitchy visuals. This stylistic choice, however, I would argue has its flaws, which are more noticeable in Splatoon 3 than they were in Octo expansion. The reason I would say the flaws are more noticeable is because the primary visual effect used in Return of the Mammalians is image distortion, which is the displacement of parts of an image in different directions, which creates that classic glitchy look. This effect was used in Octo expansion, but had a much more minor role, with that mode instead focusing more on its vaporwave appearance. The reason for me seeing image distortion as a flaw is because it doesn't do much to experiment or make itself unique in a Splatoon way, whereas the vaporwave visuals are distinctive in Octo expansion in meaningful ways, such as its influence in the music, the background visuals, and the thematic UI. Image distortion really as an effect is pretty tired out as a whole, and I think for games especially, there's a huge opportunity to experiment with how actual visual glitches can appear in games. In Breath of the Wild, when you clip out of the starting shrine and fall down this hole to the left, the screen starts to display colorful and noisy textures, which is not only cool and pretty, but also pretty cool. And that's just one example, but there's even some cool visual glitches that can happen within Splatoon games themselves. Here's some freeze frames of what I'm talking about. These images are from videos of people on screen, but I think showing off stills lets you see some of the cool bugs better. I would say the few examples just shown better represent the pretty cool visuals that glitchy effects can create. And I think it's extra cool that these are actual visual bugs in games, but there is a method to create very similar looking visuals. I originally thought this method I was about to talk about was used in the data logs in Return of the Mammalians, but I'm pretty sure it's just cropped pieces of the full image with some glitched art attached. And that's okay because nonetheless, the method to create similar looking visuals is data bending, which is an effect typically created by using a hex editor to have image bytes changed, deleted, or added onto in order to create corrupt images. So to create some purposeful applications for data bending and to make it work better than what the single player already uses, I think looking back to how Octo expansion implements vaporwave can be a really good starting point. The three main parts of Octo expansion that vaporwave influenced are again the music, the background elements, and the UI. The UI is a given and I'll touch on that in a bit, but the first two of these three don't quite work for data bending since vaporwave is a lot broader of a thing, being more visually and musically distinct. But what these first two examples show is that the reason vaporwave is so defining for Octo expansion is because it influenced things that directly build atmosphere. And with that knowledge, I think the best way to implement data bending would be to include it in a subtle but impactful way, with the coolest way I think being to implement it in some way with the player ink, since the enemy ink is already unique to the fuzz. This could possibly be in conjunction with the ring around the screen that shows up as the player is damaged, and your ink could gradually get more data bent along with it. I tried my best to create some examples myself, and I think this would really give the single player that "whoa, look at this" feeling, by being added onto Splatoon's main gimmick of the ink and being limited to again only showing up when the player is damaged, as to not have it become annoying to see all the time. Bonus for it being a cool effect in limited ink levels, and the lower your ink, the more data bent your ink gets. And now going back to the UI, I think data bending has the coolest applications for it. To start off, I think the biggest strength of data bending is that just by changing a few bytes around, you can drastically change how an image appears. And you could implement this in game to give that deep level of individuality by randomly changing bytes each time a piece of data bent UI shows up, which would be super cool. It would be like how every copy of Mario 64 is personalized. I can't believe they haven't brought that back. Here's a few comparisons of before and after on parts of UI that I felt looked better with data bending. I created them myself, and I think they really uplift the atmosphere of Return of the Mammalians. And that's it. Danke for watching. You can scroll for another video while this outro plays. I'm hoping to start implementing claymation and other visual effects since I'm not super good with video editing. I'll also cover other topics that interest me. Splatoon 3 has just been the game. Enjoy your day.